the more I think about it, the more complicated it becomes, really. Because you find yourself in a position which was not of your making, and even our government was in a position which wasn't of its own making, but rather of the generation before.
I saw this German disappear behind a tree, and I thought at the time, well, he's being cheeky, I'll just scare the life out of him and I'll shift him, if nothing else. And I fired at the base of this tree, not at the German, because I couldn't see him, he was behind the tree. I fired at the base of this tree with my rifle, and unfortunately the bullet went straight through and killed him. He was found dead on the other side later on, and that was it.
We have a situation that you find in the end of the book of Judges in the Bible, where it says there was then no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So we make our own rules, which don't always agree with what other people's rules are, and so we have conflict. My name is Bernard Cooper. I grew up in Wellingborough, which was a town of about 30,000 inhabitants then, very much a country town. I left in school in 1940. Worst possible time to leave. You knew very well it wouldn't be long before you were called up, and that was it. When the war started, I was only, 16. That's right, about 16. This was the sort of thing you thought, well, it'll be over in a year or two. And you didn't really think about it personally, except that rationing came along and you didn't get this and got that. Life was a little difficult. And as time went on, of course, they began to drop the call-up age until it was 19. And then, of course, I left school when I was 17, so that was 2 years later. I was receiving call-up papers, which something of a shock. My father had been in the First World War. He was a stretcher bearer with the medical corps, and he was in some of the thick of the fighting around Ypres in Belgium. I know he had some harrowing experiences there, but he never talked about them. I do remember him being deputed to look after a young soldier, a very young chap that was dying, who was very concerned about what his mother was going to say. My dad was very moved by that experience. It was in the field hospital, of course. And he, being a stretcher bearer, I mean, he was right in the front line. Very early on, of course, having learned what I did from my father, I realised the sort of person I was and what the situation was in the world. When I received my papers, of course, it was going to be a major milepost in life, and I had to decide whether to volunteer to go into the services or not. And I had already made up my mind about it, so that it was a gut feeling, and that was it. And I registered an objection to military service in the armed forces. I think the very fact that being as a Christian, I would not be prepared to go and take life in cold blood, which is what it amounts to. And the reason why, of course, I wouldn't want to pick up a gun and shoot anybody is because that person hasn't deserved it. He's a human being like me, and he deserves to have a life. And if he wants to shoot me, well, that's just too bad. And I would have taken the consequences. And I felt that was morally right to do. I just remember being there and answering questions. They were quite, it's quite imposing, you know, it's quite intimidating almost, really. Then at the tribunal, of course, you were given options, and they offered me non-combatant service, which I didn't really know. Of course, I didn't really know what that involved at the time, and I felt somehow I've got to escape out of this. And this seemed, when they offered you can do this and we'll be satisfied, then I thought, well, that's the only thing I can do. If I carry on fighting a battle which I'm going to lose, I think that's all I can remember about it. I think my family agreed with me. Friends and associates, not necessarily, no. Some of them would respect your right to make choices. There are others who despised you and said that you were just cowards. You would go into company, and of course you got your badge, NCC, and they would ask what that means. You never knew what you were going to encounter. It's a question of being in a situation where you have no control over it, and you've got to make the best of the situation. I was always prepared to do something to help people. I volunteered at one time for bomb disposal work, but I never heard any more about it. Perhaps they thought I wasn't good enough. Well, my father didn't know anything about my application for bomb disposal. I never discussed anything like that with him. This must have influenced him to some extent in joining the medical corps. He felt he was doing something to save people rather than take life. This is something where you're saving life rather than taking it. And at great risk to yourself. And I thought that's a brave thing to do, therefore I ought to do it. Nobody's going to say I'm a coward.
And of course the scenes was terrible at times, seeing, you know, different people, soldiers laying around, Germans and whatever.
Altogether we lost some 2,000 of our division killed or seriously wounded.
There was a feeling of something, you didn't know what to expect, and yet you didn't know you didn't know really what to think. I'm sorry, I can't explain it really.
There was times when even today you can't think about it or speak about it. My own family quite often quiz me on these things, and I'm not in a position to tell them, you know.
There's emotion in music. That's what I like playing. You can express yourself. And in fact, you can drive out your frustrations with music. My stance of being a CEO, of course, which are on religious grounds, I may say, and that has been my life ever since, so that I've not been a different person, I've just developed as that person. After the war, after all the austerity of the war, people felt that we're going to enter an age of plenty, and the utopia is going to come. The war's over, we shan't have any more wars like this, and everything will be fine. You could say that the war years, yes, definitely robbed people of time. A lot of things in life which were important at one time, you banish from your memory, really. This life is not the end, it's not the only life, there's a life to come, and I want to be prepared for that.